Hello, hello, and welcome to Classical Fundamentals, Turn on the Forehand Refined. So today we're going to be talking about the turn on the forehand and how it is refined in fundamentals from what we have in foundational horsemanship. Now in foundational horsemanship, all we had was a rope halter to use, so we kind of contorted the horse's head around quite a bit more, so in overflexion to get that movement around, so the movement of the hind end moving away. I don't like doing that as a rule. That's the first few things that I do with a youngster to kind of show the youngster that the sideways movement with the hind end is possible. They tend to be very off balance and not really sure how to move their body. So that's part of showing them how they have possibilities of moving their body. And when I say youngster, I mean yearling through 3-year-old. They're still pretty young at 5. That's why we don't ride until 5 in this program. But we are refining it in this fundamentals where the turn on the forehand, the thoracic sling remains lifted, and we have a correct bend. So what is turn on the forehand? So the turn on the forehand is where the forehand stays in place or goes in a very small circle, only the front end only taking a few steps, where the back end is really reaching around, doing a bigger circle around the front end. So, the back end does a bigger circle than the front end, and the adductors are really working in that hind end. So the turn of the forehand is what I call a proto-lateral movement. So it is kind of a lateral movement, but it's not within the lateral side movements of the horse's classical training. So the side movements would be things like the shoulder in and the haunches in / haunches out. But the turn on the forehand is where you start. So it's a very basic sideways movement. It is counter bent, so it is bent away from the movement, the direction of movement, kind of like a shoulder in. So, and this is exactly where I get my shoulder in. So we do the turn on the forehand, and then later we'll be moving on to shoulder in the circle. So that's where we get that. It is not hind quarter disengagement. So if you go to something like natural horsemanship, and they do a lot of hind quarter disengagements, it's a safety feature, blah, 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 that sort of thing. But turn on the forehand is very different than hind quarter disengagement. A hind quarter disengagement is something more like what we did in the foundational horsemanship, where the horse is overbent, it disengages the hindquarters from the movement of the horse. So the shoulder is allowed to drop, and the hindquarters kind of spin around into a circle. So that's also called a single rein stop in the Western world. So it's basically you're getting all of the energy that the horse has stored up, and you're just flinging it out to the side and allowing the hindquarters to just kind of like fall around. That is not a turn on the forehand. A turn on the forehand, let's see. Yep, it is the precursor to the shoulder in. And if performed correctly, it lifts and strengthens the shoulder. So since the horse is not overbent, it is in the same level of bend the shoulder in has. Then the inside shoulder should lift, and the outside shoulder is the one bearing the weight. So you've got the outside shoulder bearing the weight, and you want the inside shoulder to then lift. If that inside shoulder does not lift, you will run into one of the problems that we'll mention later. So how to perform the turn on the forehand? Turn on the forehand. The head must remain straight up and down or slightly in front of the vertical. So right here, Revan is with these slides, he'll be in between on the vertical and in front of the vertical. I personally, with my program, I do not allow the behind the vertical type movement. I don't think that's beneficial. I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions on that one. But currently, the way I do things, I do not go behind the vertical. I do not think that's beneficial. But so the head must remain straight up and down, and it will be in alignment with that inside shoulder blade right there. So the shoulder blade goes from right below and in front of the withers to right where my little mark is. That is the quote shoulder blade. And you want the center of the head to be in alignment with that part of the shoulder / chest, because it kind of runs right into their chest and pectorals. So that's where you want to be in alignment. If you are anywhere further away, so more bent than that, then you're overbent. If the horse is too far into the center line, so too straight, then you're not bent enough. If you're not bent enough, then the horse is going to have some trouble performing this turn on the forehand, because remember, the horse's head is a fulcrum, the neck is a fulcrum, and they use it to adjust balance. And so in order for the horse to be in a correct balance for this movement, the head and neck must be positioned properly. So the cue from the whip is to be where your leg is in the saddle. So even if you don't intend on riding, you do want a kind of a common place. So, if you ever lost your horse, or if your horse ever outlives you, you kind of want to have a common place where your cues are going to go, so that most horse people will kind of give the horse the same cues in the same spot. And unless there's something completely special about the training that this horse is going into, such as like a circus training or something. But we will cue the whip right where the horse's leg is, or right where your leg is when you're on the saddle. The cue is applied when asking the inside hind leg to move. And please look at that leg, because it's going to be very important. That inner leg, that you are practicing with, so like your whip is where your heel would be, basically. You want to apply that, ask, and then when the horse's leg is placed, you want to take the cue off and reward. That is very important. The timing is very important. The horse must cross the inside leg under their body, and I'm talking about inside leg as in inside the bend. So currently Revan is bent correctly, and his inside hind leg is crossing underneath of his body and in front of his standing leg. So underneath and in front of, so the horse is stepping more underneath their center line. That is the aim, and that's what you're trying to get at. And then you will take the whip cue away once the horse places the foot on the ground. So you see he has placed his foot underneath his center line a little bit. He is a little bit camped out in this position, but he has successfully gone in front of the other leg and gone more under his center line, or his center, but not quite the center of gravity line, which is different. So you want to take the cue away when that happens. It's a kind of telling the horse, yes, you did that right. That is called our negative reinforcement. So you are taking something away, subtracting a thing or a pressure to say yes to the horse. And then I will back that up with a bridge signal, such as good or good boy. The way I train my horse and the horses that I would, train. I have several bridge cues, which bridge between when they did the behavior or they did the thing and when you give them the treat. So, I don't always have a treat. I can't always have a treat in my hand to give him the treat right then and there. So it's kind of like clicker training. but I don't have a clicker. I use my voice. So my bridge cues are good boy if he, or good girl, depending on the horse's gender. Um, if they did the thing perfectly and they are about to get a treat. My other bridge cue is good or yes, and that's he knows that he's almost there. He needs to try a little harder for the next bridge cue, which would be good boy. And then the treat always comes after good boy. So he knows there's a couple of things where it's like, okay, you're almost there, please keep trying, and then now we've got it. So I like doing that. The benefits of the shoulder or benefits of the turn on the forehand rather. A correct turn on the forehand strengthens the thoracic sling grouping of muscles. So that's where I have the circles. The thoracic sling is right where that shoulder area is, where I have highlighted with the muscles. That's all internal. So that's, the lats, that's part of the trapezius, that's a lot of different muscles working together to lift their rib cage up because they do not have a collarbone to give them that stability. I think the same thing with dogs, and I believe the same thing with cats. But that second one that highlights the under neck muscles, that is not necessarily a part of the thoracic sling, but it is extremely important. So the jaw muscle and the brachiocephalic grouping of muscles that goes and connects with the pectorals also assists in the lifting of the thoracic sling. If those muscles are not relaxed, and if they are locked up for some reason, then the thoracic sling cannot function properly. So that's why I added those in there with it. It strengthens the trapezius and rhomboides when the bend is appropriate. And I'm talking about the cervical trapezius. So basically the top line over the neck. This is strengthened because the horse is lifting and they're using part of that muscle to lift the front part of their shoulders and bend their neck properly. So that's why the correct bend is necessary, because that contracts that inside of the neck. So you bend to the inside as in the inside of the bend. They are moving in the opposite direction of the bend and using the inside muscles to support themselves. The inside lats and abdominals tighten and lift in a correct turn on the forehand. So that's where I've highlighted here. So that is connected to the thoracic sling, and the inside should help lift. So that's why we are not disengaging the hindquarters. We are engaging that hindquarter, the lats, the thoracic sling, all of that. That's why it's important for the horse to stay upright when doing this exercise. The hind adductors, so the ones that swing the leg in towards the body, are activated when crossing under the body. So this is working those muscles. So if there is an issue with these adductors, the horse will not want to or will not be capable of crossing that leg underneath of its body. And then this can also identify some lamenesses. And I think I completely didn't put the slide in, but let's go over it anyway. The semitendinosus and biceps femoris are activated when the inside hind leg is placed under the body and is weight bearing. So that means basically the entire hind end of the horse. There's a lot of long muscles that are grouped and that work when the horse has placed that leg underneath of itself. So this can identify lamenesses if you know what you're looking for. Alright, so if the horse's bend becomes too much So these are some problems with the turn on the forehand. So if the horse's bend becomes too much, as in the bend is, like the bend of the neck is too much, like I'm showing you here, the horse's inside shoulder will fall and they will not be able to balance properly on their outside shoulder. So they will not be able to maintain that thoracic sling lift, and they're just going to drop their back, not engage their abdominals or lats, and they're just going to disengage. So that's more like the disengagement of the hind leg, or a hind end, actually. And you can see how it's different. The horse is really just it's just not it. If the horse has a lameness in its front end, this will also happen. So if the horse does not want to bear weight on its shoulder, especially that outside shoulder, so doing turn on the forehand going both directions is extremely important for so that you don't have a unilateral issue. But yeah, if there's some sort of front end issue, the horse is not going to want to bear weight on that, and they will automatically collapse that shoulder and just move sideways away from you. If the horse has a lameness in the hind end, the leg might not cross in front of the opposite leg, or may just simply back up or move forward when asked to move to the side. So I've seen some horses where they were very lame. When I had a clinic when we were doing these like really basic movements, and there was this one horse that was so stiff, like you touch the horse, he was rock hard in his muscles, and he could not perform this movement because he was barely able to bend his head around for a carrot stretch. So there was so much going on in his pelvis that he could not cross his legs in front of each other. Like he would try to cross from behind and back up and do kind of like an opposite turn on the forehand, but he just could not do that. So, that's where you go back to your vet for a lameness exam and your body worker for hopeful solutions to this issue. And of course, if there are any signs of lameness or pain when executing this exercise, stop immediately and contact a vet for an evaluation before moving on with training. Coming up next, I will show you some of Revan turn on the forehand for groundwork positioning and for in-hand positioning. The lunge work, you could do this from a distance, but since it's not really part of like a lunge work curriculum, that's why I did not put that together for you in the lunge work position. If your horse is sighted, so if the horse doesn't have a problem seeing you, you could do this from a distance, because they will read your body language, they will read your signal, and you could just do this without even touching them. But Revan can't really see me very well, so I'd have to kind of put this to a verbal cue and then make a kind of like a verbal cue out of it, without being able to rely on my positioning or my body language. All right, so thank you, and let's move on. And here we are. I did want to show you kind of what doing it wrong looks like. It's basically just a hindquarter disengagement, but he is overbent, and he is dropping his inside shoulder, and then basically moving sideways away from me, kind of like in a passade type manner. I only asked for a few times. So here's a correct turn on the forehand. So I'm asking him with the bend in his neck to keep lifted. I only ask for a few steps because I'm looking for quality steps, not a lot of steps. See right here, he is lifted in the shoulder, and it's okay if they move their front end a little bit. They don't have to pivot, but they need to remain lifted. So here I'm overbending him a little bit to kind of get him to respond. And then he continues to push his face into my shoulder. But what I'm looking for is his shoulders. Are they remaining lifted? Yes? Okay, then that's good. So, thank you for watching the Turn on the Forehand fundamentals. I hope you found this educational, and I hope you found this helpful. The next thing, which is coming up in a minute here, is going to be bending and stelling, or stelling. And that is the way the head is in relation to the rest of the body and how that matters. So this is one of the exercises for bending and stelling. All right, thank you, patrons. Have a wonderful day.